I'm going to get Tony to hang on because we're going to throw you into a dialogue right now. And this is a dialogue session. And in this dialogue session as well, I'd like to introduce the other members of this panel. So besides Tony, we also have Dr. Ralph Ostertag, Director, Digital and Technology, Asia Pacific at the Heineken Company. And to guide this conversation along will be Arvind Mathur, who's the Chief Information Officer, AMEA at Kellogg Company. Gentlemen, good morning, and the conversation is yours.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Wonderful hearing from you again, Tony. Let me do a quick, share a couple of things as well before we kick this off. So Tony, of course, I know we go back a long time. In fact, Tony was responsible for starting off my career. And a couple of things that you said, Tony, have really stuck with me as we worked together a number of years. I think today you used the word strategic discipline, which is something I've certainly learned from you, and I think it's a very important thing. And it comes out even more clearly in your book when you talk about disruptive innovation with a checklist. And I think the point there that I've really taken away is that we need to think 10x. We need to think how to make dramatic improvements, not just incremental ones. But the way to do that is not just through winging it and just going crazy with stuff. There is a discipline required, there are checklists required, and that's what leads to success, right? So that's terrific. Thank you, Tony, and I love this opportunity to talk to you. And Ralph, my friend, Ralph is, of course, the CIO for the region for Heineken, but I know Ralph because he is a master networker and connector. I got to know Ralph because he networked with some of the people I know from my past life in Canada when he was based there. He's of course worked all across the world, and when he moved here, my friends connected me with him, and he's now connected with me and others. So I've learned so much through all of the connections that you helped me make, Ralph. So wonderful to bring the two of you together in this panel. Now, let me start off, perhaps, Tony, with you. You are talking to, like you mentioned, a lot of boards and company leaderships. The CPG industry is going through a dramatic amount of change, right? This is an industry which it focuses on making millions and millions of little things, and it goes through a complex chain of supply chain to distributors and retailers and ultimately consumers. It is a B2B2C business. The CPG companies don't have direct connectivity with our end consumers and rely on a lot of intermediates to get there. So there are a number of drivers of the business, and COVID has accelerated a change that was already happening in this industry in a very significant way. I would love to hear from you. What are you hearing from business leaders and boards in CPG, in the CPG industry, as they're going through this dramatic change?
Firstly, Arvind, it's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I'm really, really happy to see, the roles that you're playing, including leading the CIO Academy, for the next couple of years or so. CPG and COVID, two things. One is that there are three trends that CPG leaders are pretty much taken and booked as part of their strategic plans. One is the fact that, as you said, B2B2C, that, anybody, regardless of what their channel is, whether it's B2B or B2C, if they don't really have the pulse of the consumer, and if they don't have that data, they are absolutely dead, right? And so what I am seeing is tremendous acceleration to, almost like an arms race to really, really understand actual, consumption patterns, behaviors, stuff like that of consumers. Of course, great companies like Kellogg and P&G were always, kind of there, but I am seeing this accelerate like I have never, right? The second one is flexibility in supply chains. Look, I mean, the last several decades in supply chain has always been about efficiency. I think what COVID has exposed is, okay, that's good. Deliver those costs, those products at great, productivity. But if you don't have the agility when there's a crisis, you are absolutely dead, right? So what I am seeing is a tremendous twist towards doing productivity and agility, right? And the third trend that is becoming very, very apparent is that to a certain extent, and this is true across industries, but certainly for CPG because of usually global footprint, is they're starting to treat their employees and the way that we work, much more in a free market economy standpoint. I think CPG industry, at least the larger ones, were pretty traditional in the way they kind of worked with employees and gig economy and work from home, many of the other systems and stuff like that. And in HR, you're starting to see a trend that is, much more like Silicon Valley HR.
That's absolutely true. We've seen some of these patterns in Kellogg as well, especially on the supply chain side. I mean, we had designed a lot of things for efficiency, like you said, and some of those things actually became some of the biggest challenges. Single source, lowest possible cost suppliers, and if something happens to that supply chain, it completely brings everything down. So now there's a lot more analytics around what are our options, what are the ups and downs that we can make. Consumer engagement, like you said, has suddenly become a lot more important. People are buying, consumption patterns and purchase patterns have shifted to e-commerce at a much higher rate. It was already quite high. And not just that, even in our B2B relationships, we're starting to see that retailers who would in the past wait for a seller to come and sell to them are more interested to place orders on a B2B electronic platform, which was just not a possibility in the past. And these things are starting to accelerate now. Let me shift the question to Ralph. Ralph, what are you seeing? How are you seeing the changing patterns in all three areas that Tony also called out? How companies in the CPG industry work with consumers, customers, and employees?
Yeah. Also, thanks from my side, Arvind, for the beautiful introduction. Happy to be here today in the panel. And it's an excellent question. And maybe let me start actually with this ambition of Heineken, and then I can explain in this context how I see that. Because our ambition is to become the best connected brewer in the world. And I really love this ambition. It's bold, it's inspiring, but what does it mean? In the end, it's all about the connections to our customers, consumers, and employees, as we just discussed here with Tony already. And I can see a big impact on all these connections. Also because of the COVID situation now. And just to explain everyone maybe in the session why we distinguish between customers and consumers. So you are the consumers, you drink our beer, but then the customers are, for example, bars, restaurants, and supermarkets or shops who buy directly from us in most of the cases. And if I look at the consumer side, I see there a very big shift in the consumer behavior because what is changing now is where the people consume the beer. They consume it more at home and not on trade, how we call it, in bars and restaurants. At the same time, if they consume at home, they buy more online and less in shops and supermarkets. So that's a very big shift in a very short time. And you ask about changing priorities here. So for us, and here I want to build on what Tony said, I have exactly the same opinion. You need to go aggressively into this situation, offensive. And this means we massively accelerate in our e-commerce business in this context. Yeah, and we do this via different channels. In some cases, we directly sell to our consumers. For example, in Malaysia, when we had a lockdown and it was difficult for the consumers to get their drinks, we had our own digital platform where they could buy and could get it delivered in an acceptable time. We also work with the big marketplaces where we then have our flagship stores like in Singapore and Lazada, for example. And we work a lot with the food players. That's a great channel for us where we sell on our own, where we have our own stores, but also for sure we sell via our customers, all the restaurants who are on these platforms. And there we also have a strategic partnership with Grab to give this a higher priority. That's more the consumer side. If we look at customer, for sure, very big impact. If you look at bars, restaurants in some countries, complete lockdown, there is no business anymore. If they can, they use then food delivery partners to still sell. And here we started a few initiatives to support our customers. For example, we have experts who can coach them, teach them how to ideally leverage these food delivery platforms. And we also had a nice initiative of our Tiger brand, which we call Support the Streets, which was actually really innovative from my perspective, because you could buy vouchers from your favorite bars and restaurants, and they get the money directly in the difficult time, and later you can go back and use your vouchers, so you can support your favorite bars, so to say. Maybe to close on the employee side, yeah, also very big impact. It started with working from home, very radical shift in a very short time. At the beginning, everyone thought that's not possible, but it worked. And I think I'm impressed how well it worked. If you have done the homework before to have the tools and infrastructure in place, then this works quite well. At the same time, for sure, the people, they miss the social contact. And there I could observe really a big change regarding the usage of social intranets. We have, for example, an internal Facebook platform, Workplace. And before COVID, you know, people were on, but we were always wondering, how can we bring more engagement onto the platform? And now this is very different. Everyone is on the platform every day. The entire communication from leaders, but also the employees, is happening over the platform. It's a place where you can meet in these times. There are a lot of fun activities, and this is really very impressive to see. And another point I maybe want to highlight to close then is the upskilling part and training, because there's also an impact now with COVID, because people cannot go to external trainings. They also for sure cannot travel to do trainings. And there we launched a very comprehensive digital technology upskilling initiative during COVID times for the entire workforce globally, where people can from everywhere with any device access internal, external learning content. And this is going really well, because that's the only way how people can do trainings now. And we are also working on more tailored programs for senior leaders now. Yeah, that's how I see the situation.
Yeah, I think it's impacting every side of our lives. Maybe a question for Tony. You know, I personally worked across a couple of industries. I've spent a lot of my time in CPG, but also some time in the financial service industry. The two are completely different, chalk and cheese kind of situations. The key difference being that technology is the product in financial services, whereas in CPG and many other industries in manufacturing and other sectors, technology is an enabler to the main product flow. And Tony, the question to you is, again, as you've worked with boards and leadership, business leadership in the companies, how are you seeing leaders, business leaders in these companies, shifting in their perception of what role technology and digital capabilities play? And a corollary, what is the opportunity for CIOs and IT leaders in companies in such industries, given what's happening right now?
Yes. A fantastic question. And I think the contrast between finance and CPG is very telling. See, here's what's happened to most boards, right? In the early days, so, you know, think about 5, 7, 10 years ago, you know, the boards kept hearing these messages from futurists on digital is important, right? They're, you know, given the lack of sufficient digital boards, so McKinsey, in a study a couple of years ago in the US, basically said only 5% of the Fortune 500 companies in the US, even in the US, these big companies, had capable, you know, digital expertise in the boards, right? So it's actually horrible. So when you kind of think about it, this is the initial starting point for most boards was, oh, it must be hackers and cybersecurity. So that became the big deal, right? Of course, the industries that were most under threat, so, you know, starting with media and entertainment and then finance, that were technology driven, the board started to kind of invest much more in digital transformation there. I think today where we're at is that whether you are in the board of a CPG company or a public sector organization's equivalent of a board, it is now evident that digital is the technology that's going to disrupt your business model. So in other words, what has happened is that these guys have stopped thinking about doing digital strategy. The initial thinking was, let's get a CDO, chief digital officer. Let's get a digital strategy. Let's get a consulting company to help us through this. They have now recognized that this isn't about a digital strategy. This is about redoing your business strategy, your business model, your digital products, which can only be done by the CEO and boards. And that is starting to percolate. And I think it's a fascinating opportunity for the CIOs, because you have to play two roles. You have to firstly become the educator, right? You have to show the possibilities. And that's a lot of what, I think some of the work that I've done these days is in partnering with CIOs to do, what I call an awake session for some of these boards to say, oh my God, is that really true? Is it my industry? I was in the legal industry. I thought I was immune. It's like, no, thank you very much, because you now have small claims courts which are being conducted by AI, not by people in Latvia. So I think people are starting to recognize that this is about them. So that's one, education. The second is to don't just educate, experiment on the side, have small, quick, cheap wins, blow your business's minds. If you don't do that, no amount of talk is going to get you that credibility.
Yeah, that's so true. I think it's a combination of those things, Tony. I'll share a little example, since we're all in this together here. Share a little example from my experience at Kellogg just in the last few months. Just before COVID had started, as I was starting up in Kellogg here, I started by doing an exercise to kind of understand where do we need to invest, where do we need to make inroads with technology and digital, and frankly more so transformation. The way I did that was we did a business capability analysis. It's a standard enterprise architecture kind of framework where we looked at all of the business capabilities, not systems, not technologies, but business capabilities. And we said, where are we today on this versus market industry benchmark? Are we ahead or behind? And how important is it to achieve our goals? And that shows you gaps. And in each of these areas, the question was, do we have the right, as always, people, process, and technology to achieve competitive advantage? And it was interesting, before COVID, the conversation often was, our technology is not maybe as good as the best in the industry, but our people and processes are good enough, and that's fine. We can handle it. Now, the way I see the conversation changing to some extent is, people process is good, but that's not enough. We need to do more on the technology side as well. And I think that's an opportunity. And to your point, while education and all that priming has helped, very important is to have these little quick wins saying, hey, do you realize how by doing a little bit with some agility, you can achieve these benefits? And that really fires them up. And I think there's an opportunity for us to really help transform the mindsets and what our leadership expects from us as technology leaders as well. That's great.
You got 100%. Absolutely, yes.
Ralph, would you want to add something there? How have you seen that change at Heineken last couple of years or so?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And it's super interesting to hear when you talk about the capability-based approach, because we have done exactly the same just recently, where we have looked at all the capabilities of the company. We have done a global prioritization, actually, then bottom up from all the countries, but also top down from global functions and even the board, to come then to an integrated view on what are the top priorities from a business perspective, to really invest the money in the coming years. And then we were deriving, okay, what's necessary from a digital technology perspective. And also to come back what Tony said, I agree. It's not a good approach from my perspective to have a separate or isolated digital strategy, because it should be fully integrated in the overall business strategy. And then you can see what is needed from a digital technology perspective, or are there maybe some extra topics which you drive within digital technology, but it should be fully integrated. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, we're not even calling it necessarily digital, right? We're calling it a business strategy for the digital world.
Exactly.
Right? There you go.
Exactly.
There you go.
And how we do that in the end, we have then the strategic priorities from a business perspective, and bold moves, and then we can see how do we support from a digital technology perspective to make this happen. Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have just under a minute left. I'd love to just get 10 seconds of what do you think is the number one thing IT leaders in the industry should be focusing on in the next 30 to 60 days? Tony, go ahead first.
Figure out the biggest disruptive business model opportunity and save to reinvest. Save some money within your own budget and start experimenting on it.
Thank you. Terrific. Ralph.
I think from my perspective, it's important to review your priorities to see where you go more in an offensive mode and to see where you have to change the approach and stay agile.
Thank you, Ralph.
Yeah.
And just, I'll add mine as well. What I'm focusing on right now is kind of what Tony had mentioned. The current situation has opened up a lot of gaps, a lot of opportunities where businesses are struggling to figure out, how can I solve this problem and find ways to do quick wins in some of those areas. Not all, pick a few, get 5 or 6 things going, 1 or 2 of them will click, and that will make a huge difference. So with that, thank you. Wonderful talking with you both. It's a real pleasure. Thank you so much. And back to...
my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a great talk.
Thank you.